Even with the ceasefire in effect, Israel has made it clear to the world that it will not give up air superiority over Iran. The statement was made by Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, who said that this supremacy in the skies is a vital strategic issue, not only for Israel's security, but for the stability of the Middle East. The current situation is tense. Despite a pause in the fighting, the Israeli government remains on alert, especially after the advances in Iran's nuclear program and the strengthening of terrorist groups supported by Tehran, such as Hezbollah and the Houthis. With diplomatic support from the United States and a determined leadership in Tel Aviv, Israel launched Operation Rise Lion on June 13, 2025, a precision airstrike that stunned the world. Israeli F-35 stealth fighters, with logistical and tactical support from saboteurs embedded in Iranian territory, destroyed long-range radars positioned near the borders with Iraq and Syria. The action paved the way for deeper bombing. F-15 and F-16 fighters followed in heavy formation, striking air defense systems and strategic installations. Within hours, Israel had neutralized much of Iran's air defense infrastructure. Even more shocking was the direct attack on the Central Command of the Iranian Air Force, in which at least 30 high-ranking officers were killed. Without leadership and with radars turned off, Iranian airspace was left vulnerable. For the first time, Israeli fighter jets operated freely over Tehran, the Iranian capital, without any challenge. Something unthinkable until then, since Iran has always been considered a regional power in the air defense sector, operating advanced technologies from Russia, China, and locally developed models. The speed and precision of the offensive shook Iran's strategic pride. Tehran's response, however, has not been silence. Despite the severe losses, Iran has maintained its combative stance. Foreign Minister Abbas Arak has declared that neither Israel nor the United States will stop the country from pursuing its nuclear ambitions. In parallel, the Iranian regime has cut off cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, making international monitoring more difficult, and has promised to build new uranium enrichment facilities. This scenario has raised alarm bells around the world. The IAEA has confirmed that Iran's nuclear program has been severely affected, but there are doubts about the true extent of the damage. Reports suggest that some of the country's stockpile of enriched uranium may have survived, raising the possibility that Iran is still in a position to build nuclear weapons. In the United States, members of Congress, especially from the Democratic Party, have expressed skepticism about the success of the Israeli operation and fear that Iran could resume its program with more determination than ever. For Israel, this risk is unacceptable. So the plan is clear: to maintain full control of Iranian airspace, with or without a ceasefire. The constraints on Iran's ability to rebuild its defenses are considerable. Russia, its main supplier of anti-aircraft systems, is facing a shortage of military resources, and China, the largest buyer of Iranian oil, may not be willing to get involved, as it has its own geopolitical agenda, including a possible war over control of Taiwan. Even if Beijing were to agree to sell the necessary defense systems, production and delivery would take time that Israel intends to use to its advantage. The stakes go beyond conventional warfare. For Israel, this aerial dispute represents an existential issue. Iran's supremacy in the skies is not just a tactical advantage, but a non-negotiable red line. While Tehran insists on pressing ahead with its nuclear program, Israel has shown that it is prepared to act whenever it feels its security is threatened. The war may have paused, but behind the scenes, the confrontation between the two countries continues, silent, lethal, and over our heads. Despite the devastation caused by the Israeli operation, Iran has not yet given up on its strategic objectives. The government in Tehran insists on keeping its nuclear program active, despite strong international pressure. The break with the International Atomic Energy Agency was a symbolic and practical step in this direction. Iran wants complete freedom to move forward without being accountable to the world. For Israel, this represents an unacceptable threat, not only because a nuclear Iran would drastically change the balance of power in the Middle East, but because it would directly endanger the survival of the Jewish state. Iranian statements make this clear. Minister Abbas Arak not only defied the actions of Israel and the United States, but also openly announced the construction of new uranium enrichment facilities. This is not rhetoric, it is a direct provocation. And in response, Israel has doubled down. It will maintain a constant presence in Iranian skies, with continuous monitoring and immediate strike capability. Surveillance has become permanent. This new status quo is underpinned by a paradigm shift in modern warfare. In the past, controlling land or sea borders was the key. Today, whoever controls the airspace defines the limits of war. And Israel understands this better than any other country in the region. The use of artificial intelligence, reconnaissance drones, cyber attacks, and internal sabotage has become an integral part of Israel's arsenal. This war is not just fought with bombs, but with data, surgical precision, and deadly silence. Inside Iran, the effects of Operation Lion Rise are still being felt. The military infrastructure has been severely damaged. Bases have been destroyed, radars have been knocked out, and troop morale has been weakened. Many surviving officers have been transferred or dismissed, while the regime is desperately trying to reorganize its air defenses. But time is not on Iran's side. Reconstruction will not be quick or easy, and Israel knows this. Every day that passes is an advantage for Tel Aviv, which is expanding its control network and consolidating its presence in Iranian airspace. Meanwhile, the international community remains divided. European countries are calling for restraint, warning of the risk of an irreversible escalation. At the same time, however, they recognize that Iran has lost credibility by abandoning the IAEA protocols. The United States is facing an internal dilemma. Part of Congress supports Israel's actions as a necessary evil, while another part fears that they will lead to a large-scale war. Joe Biden, under electoral and political pressure, maintains an ambiguous position. He condemns the Iranian advance, but hesitates to fully endorse the Israeli offensive. In practical terms, Iran finds itself increasingly isolated. Russia, preoccupied with its own conflicts and weakened economically, is unlikely to be able to supply new defense systems. China, for its part, is calculating every step based on its own interests. Despite being the largest buyer of Iranian oil, Beijing may avoid any direct military engagement with Tehran, especially with tensions rising in the Pacific and the possibility of a conflict in Taiwan. Thus, Iran is heading for a slow, uncertain reconstruction, dependent on allies who may never fully commit. And it is precisely in this power vacuum that Israel is advancing. With clear skies and assured superiority, the Netanyahu government now has the freedom to anticipate moves and neutralize threats before they even take shape. The goal is not only to prevent the reactivation of the nuclear program, but to stifle any future attempt. The aim is to establish a doctrine of extreme deterrence. Any wrong move by Iran will be met with full force, without warning, without hesitation. This is the new power game in the Middle East, and there is no room for hesitation. With the new reality imposed by Israel, Iran now needs to reassess its survival strategy. It is not just a matter of rebuilding radars and anti-aircraft batteries. It is a structural crisis of confidence. The Iranian leadership, which has always boasted of the inviolability of its territory, is now dealing with the public humiliation of seeing enemy fighter jets flying over its capital without resistance. Nationalist rhetoric continues in official speeches, but within the armed forces, the atmosphere is one of panic and improvisation. Military analysts say the next phase of the conflict could involve not just airstrikes, but also more intense cyber warfare, internal sabotage, and even targeted assassinations of scientists and strategic officials. Israel has a long history of such actions, including Mossad intelligence operations on Iranian soil. And now, with controlled airspace and open infiltration routes, such operations are even more likely. Meanwhile, the Iranian population is living in a state of uncertainty. The local media, controlled by the regime, tries to cover up the consequences of Operation Rise Lion, but informal reports leak through the networks and on the streets. The general feeling is that the country has been exposed in an unprecedented way. Many Iranians, including within the system itself, are beginning to question whether it is really worth persisting in a nuclear program that only brings destruction and isolation. The dilemma is profound. Give in and preserve what is left, or persist and risk a complete military collapse. On the Israeli side, confidence is evident. With the Air Force operating freely over critical regions of Iran, Tel Aviv has the luxury of choosing its next targets calmly, strategically, and with absolute technological superiority. War, at this point, does not require haste. It requires vigilance, and Israel has plenty of that. Electronic intelligence systems, signal collection, spy satellites, and human espionage networks form a monitoring ecosystem that allows any relevant Iranian movement to be detected almost in real time. Behind this offensive is also a less visible element, but just as important as the missiles, the narrative war. Israel knows that it cannot just win militarily, it needs to justify its action to the world. And that is why, for each attack, there is a ready justification, a press conference, a dossier revealed to the international media. It is an attempt to transform each bomb into a diplomatic message. We are defending ourselves, and we are right to do so. This effort is strategic. Many countries, even those that publicly condemn Israel's actions, do so more out of political obligation than conviction. Behind the scenes, many nations recognize that Iran's nuclear program poses a real risk, especially after its past attacks, threats to its allies in the region, and its history of supporting terrorism. For many Western governments, Israel is simply doing the dirty work that no one else wants to take on directly. However, this path is risky. Maintaining air superiority over Iran requires not only military capability, but also composure in the face of possible retaliation. And it will come, whether through attacks by militias supported by Tehran or through asymmetric actions against civilian or strategic targets. Iran may have lost control of the skies, but it still has the tools of war, especially in indirect warfare, which involves sabotage, kidnapping, bombings, and regional terrorism. That is why Israel, even with the advantage, remains on high alert. No aerial victory is permanent if it is not sustained by control, pressure, and, above all, intelligence. Surveillance has become the new oxygen of national security. And, faced with the existential risk posed by a nuclear Iran, the Israeli government appears willing to do whatever it takes to prevent that scenario, even if that means a long war disguised as silence.